incredible opportunity to speak with Andrew Belle over Zoom. Andrew was born and raised just outside of Chicago in Illinois, and he talked about that and where he grew up and how he got into music. He learned guitar at a very early age from his dad, who taught him on a 12-string guitar, which in itself is intense. Tuning the thing must be intense. He told us about how he wasn't really allowed to listen to pop music growing up, so his friends would make him little mixtapes, and he became obsessed with Counting Crows, so that was one of his favorite bands growing up. He ended up going to college in Indiana, not for music, though, but while he was there, he talked about an experience going to see Dashboard Confessional and the headlining band and how that kind of changed his life. He started writing songs while in college after that experience at that concert. And by the time he had graduated from college, he started playing the local bars and clubs around his hometown. He talked about recording his first record, how one song landed on KCRW, and that really changed his life, got a manager that way, the huge impact Grey's Anatomy has had on his career. And he tells us all about his most recent record, Nightshade. You can check out our interview with Andrew Belle on our Facebook page as well, on our YouTube channel. We have a ton of interviews up on both those platforms, a bunch of video interviews. You should definitely check those out. It'd be awesome if you like us on Facebook and subscribe to our YouTube channel at Bringing It Backwards, and follow us on Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok at Bringing Back Pod.
We'd appreciate your support if you follow and subscribe to our podcast, wherever you listen to podcasts.
We're Bringing It Backwards with Andrew Belle. This podcast is about you, your journey in music, and we'll talk, obviously, about your new record, Nightshade.
Okay, great.
Sweet. I did read you're from Winfield, Illinois. Is that born and raised?
Yeah, I was born there. I mean, there's a town next to Winfield called Wheaton. That's a little more accurate to where I grew up.
Okay.
And yeah, I was born here and went to school here. I did, after college or after high school, I went to school in Indiana for like my undergraduate degree, and then came back here to Chicago and started, playing in bars and restaurants and waiting tables and that kind of thing. And then eventually, when I was about 24, I relocated down to Nashville.
Okay.
I made my first record there and started touring, out of there, and kind of really got the foundation of my career started there. And then moved back up to Chicago. I got married. My wife and I moved to Los Angeles for a while. We had our first child there. And then we came back here to Chicago after that. I've been here for the last, I guess, almost 5 years.
Wow, that's awesome. Where I just moved to Nashville from Southern California, from San Diego.
Oh, well, cool. Yeah, we were in Pasadena when we lived in LA.
Okay.
And then in Nashville, I was like, if you take 65 south, like there's a Harding Place exit, kind of as you're heading toward like Brentwood and that world, Nippers Corner, I think they call it. That's kind of where I lived. Yeah.
Oh, right on. I'm even farther south. I'm by Franklin.
Oh, okay, cool. Yeah. I'm down there all the time.
Right on, man. Well, cool. So I want to rewind a bit. So how close were you to Chicago when you grew up? Was that fairly close? I'm not really familiar with the area.
Oh, no, it's like, honestly, it's almost the same. It might be a little farther than Franklin is from Nashville. It's a good like 35 miles.
Oh, okay.
40 miles even. Yeah. So, you always assume it's going to take at least an hour to get there.
Got it. So like if a band came to town that you wanted to see, you'd have to drive about an hour to see them in Chicago.
Yeah.
Is that
it was definitely like
closest spot?
Yeah, it's definitely a trip, to get to the city, especially when you're young and the city's so intimidating and unknown.
Sure.
Suburbs. But so we didn't go a ton growing up, but as soon as I could drive myself, my buddies and I were always driving to the city for stuff.
Right on. How did you get into music?
Man, I mean, honestly, like in 7th grade, the Counting Crows, were like my favorite band. And I asked my dad. Yeah.
You're the first person to tell me the Counting Crows were your favorite band.
Oh, yeah.
A lot of people love the Counting Crows. I mean, I love the Counting Crows, but that's funny that you'd bring them up as your favorite band. That's awesome.
Yeah. I mean, I was obsessed with them. I think, they had just put out like August and Everything After, I think in 96 maybe or something. And I was in middle school, junior high. My friends were listening to that and Oasis and other bands like that. And I wasn't really allowed to listen to like pop, like radio, pop radio music. my dad was kind of strict about that sort of thing. And so my friends would make me little tapes, you know, and I'd come home and I'd listen to them quietly on my boombox, and I'd record the radio during the day, because I had like a 2 cassette boombox thing, and I could like dub a tape of the radio, and I would listen on my Walkman at nighttime, you know, when I was supposed to be sleeping. And the Counting Crows, I don't know what it is about Adam Duritz and his writing. It just really affected me, and the melodies and everything, and the lyrics. And so I asked my dad to teach me how to play guitar. He had a 12-string guitar, and that's what I learned on, which is, as like a 11-year-old kid trying to learn on a 12-string, it's like so difficult.
Yeah, you know? I know. Just tuning the 12-string is a nightmare in itself, right?
Exactly. So then that led me to high school, where, you know, my friends and I were all learning the guitar and teaching each other, you know, all the different chords and things. You know, this is all like right as the internet is being born. And so now all of a sudden you can go online, you can like download Guitar Tablature and like learn any song you want.
Tab.
Yeah, guitartabs.com. And that's how we learn. We taught each other, you know, chords and songs and all that stuff. And so I played in bands in high school, you know, cover bands and stuff like that. And then I went away to college, and I was always kind of like, I was always the bass player in the band, you know, because I wasn't the singer and I wasn't really writing anything. But I wanted to be in the band. So they gave me a bass and I played in the back. And then when I went to college, though, I discovered Dashboard Confessional, like everybody else in college, and got really into him. And I drove up from, you know, I was in school in Indiana, and I drove to Chicago. It was a couple hours with some friends to see Dashboard in 2003, I want to say. And opening for him was a band called Brand New. And
I love Brand New. I mean, Jesse has gotten to some hot water recently, but man, they're like if I talked about favorite bands, they would be one of top 5 for me.
Well, yeah. And I went to this concert, had never heard of them, and was just floored, you know, like I just was obsessed after their set. And I completely forgot about Dashboard at that point. I went home and downloaded everything from Brand New, and just became obsessed and wanted to write, you know, like Jesse Lacey. And and so that, you know, that kind of got me into, I wanted to all of a sudden start my own band in college. And so I started writing songs for the first time, and discovered, okay, I think I have a little bit of a talent for writing, you know, crafting words and melody and that kind of thing. And I'm not really the best singer in the world, but I'll figure that out. And so I started a little band in college and kind of did that throughout the years. And then my senior year, when I was about to graduate, I don't know, I started discovering more folk singer-songwriter stuff, like Sufjan Stevens and Damian Rice, and like all these like more mellow guys that were kind of inspiring me. And so I started writing more singer-songwriter acoustic style. And in addition to that, you know, I had this instinct that, you know, I love the idea of being in a band, but, you know, right after college, that's usually a pretty formative time when people tend to maybe get jobs or start to get married or have kids. And I didn't like the idea of, you know, not being able to pursue my dream because maybe my drummer couldn't go out on the road anymore, or, you know, the guitar player had a kid or whatever.
Depending on other people.
Yeah. So I don't know how I was wise enough to have that instinct, but I did. And I was like, you know what, I'm just going to be a solo singer-songwriter. And so I started doing that. And that just allowed me so much more flexibility and freedom to do whatever I wanted to. And I moved home. Like I said, I was playing in bars and restaurants and waiting tables at the same time. And then
doing covers or doing your own originals at this point?
I'd say like 75% covers, and then I'd sprinkle in my own.
Oh, cool.
You know, the early songs that I was beginning to write back then, I'd sprinkle those in. And after doing that for a couple of years, a friend of mine said, "Hey, you know, I've got a buddy in the city. He's got a studio, and he's a really good producer and engineer. You should take a couple of these songs and go make a little EP with him." So I did, and that really got the ball rolling for me. This is back in 2007, when MySpace was still pretty much like the primary platform for online digital listening. And I remember getting hit up by this college radio promoter out of Minneapolis, you know, and they were like, "Hey, you know, we found your songs. We think you could be cool for a college radio campaign. you know, so, and I was sort of naive enough to think, hey, this could work, you know, so, and, sure, I'll give you a couple $1,000 and I'll, mail out to all these radio stations. I just was, I guess, naive enough I guess knowing what I know now and how hard it is to crack into like a radio campaign, now I would never advise myself to do that, but I did. And, it just so happened that, we sent out to KCRW in Los Angeles, and and one of the DJs there like played my song a couple times, and he was also music supervising some television shows, and he licensed one of my songs, for his show, and that little blip on the radar was enough to perk the interest of my very first manager. He was working at Sony at the time doing A&R, but he knew he wanted to leave and find an artist to start from the ground up with. And yeah, he hit me up. He came out to Chicago to see my very first show, and we started working together, and I moved to Nashville, made this record, and then
Real quick,
he kind of, what's that?
I'm just curious because I've been in radio for 16 years.
Okay.
Especially in Southern California. Who was the DJ that played your song? Was it Chris Muckley?
Forget. No, man, it was Nick Harcourt.
Nick Harcourt. Okay, because Chris Muckley became the PD music directors like a little bit after that.
Okay.
So I didn't know if he was the guy, because he discovered a lot of bands like
okay.
So that's why I was like Marcy's Playground. He was the first person to play Sex and Candy. Crazy. So that's why I was curious if he was the guy. He's like definitely a tastemaker. Oh, that's cool though. Okay, so KCRW.
This guy Nick Harcourt. I guess he had a show called Morning Becomes Eclectic. Maybe he still does. I don't know. But yeah, and again, I'm a young kid from Chicago. I have no idea about who this guy is or what KCRW even is, but apparently it's a big deal. And huge station. I mean, they're like the NPR-ish station of LA. Exactly. So that was just like that was a huge turning point. It got me on the radar of this guy Seth, who became my first manager, and he helped me just. I was already making my first record. I already sort of put those pieces together by myself, but after that, I had no idea what to do with it. So he helped me put together a plan of, he helped me find a booking agent, helped me figure out how to release it properly and book some, book a real tour and find a TV and film agent and all these things, all these pieces that I would not have known how to do by myself. And so, and right out of the gate, I had a lot of success with television with that first record. And that really, gave me an audience, or at least helped me start building some credibility and with touring and In My Veins,
right? That was like the first one that really kind of got. I mean, you had, was it a huge scene, right? Is that it was?
So what happened was, so like my album came out, and literally the night that it came out, there was a show called One Tree Hill. Which I'm not familiar. I never watched it, but I knew what it was. And they used my song.
I know the name, but I couldn't tell you anything about it.
Yeah, exactly. That goes for a lot of these shows. I'm so thankful that they use my music, but I don't watch any of them. One Tree Hill, the night my record came out, they used the song, and then they put like an ad card at the end of the episode saying like music by Andrew Belle and his new record, The Ladder. And that like gave me a huge boost right out of the gate. And so like that first week, all of a sudden, I'm on like Billboard Heat Seekers and like all this stuff I had no expectation of. And then in the ensuing months, like Grey's Anatomy had licensed my 3 of my songs in like a matter of months in that spring season. And then that all kind of culminated with their finale episode in 2010, where I don't know if they're still doing this, but for a long time, their finale episodes were made up of only unreleased music. And usually from artists that they had been using, throughout the season. And
really, I didn't realize that they had, because I've interviewed a lot of artists that have had songs in Grey's Anatomy and a few other shows that keep popping up. Vampire Diaries is one I remember seeing a lot, but like, I didn't realize that they do that. That's so rad. It's almost like they're helping artists on the back end without anyone really knowing.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I mean, for a long time, they were like really breaking a lot of artists, like The Fray and Snow Patrol and Ingrid Michaelson and Greg Laswell. And so I was just like stoked to.
I didn't realize that.
Yeah.
Grayson, I wonder do you know who the music supervisor is? What a show to be like a tastemaker show.
I know, dude.
Bands.
It's funny. I recently, a couple of years ago, I met somebody who was on the music sync team for that show in that season or that era. And he said something to me like they used to refer to that season as like the Andrew Belle season because there were so many of my songs in that, which, you know, it's amazing.
That's so cool.
I've never met that supervisor in person, although my manager now has a friend or is friends with them. And so one of these days I'm going to, like, you know,
give him a hug.
Yeah, give him a big hug because, like, I literally have a, you know, I have a life because of that. And
That's
so anyways,
crazy.
yeah, so they used my song in this finale episode, and it was like the scene itself was really like, you know, it was like this episode in particular was pretty wild. Like a bunch of like main characters in the show like die, and there's one scene where they use my song where somebody from the show like that everybody loves dies, and it just became like an iconic part of the show, and obviously that the reach of that show is so humongous around the world. It really started. It really caught on, and then there's another show called Castle that used that song as well, and they used it I think they used it 3 times throughout because the song became sort of like the characters in that show became like their song, I think, in some way, and so they used it multiple times throughout the series. And so that song, man, I mean, it's not like a radio hit, you know, and I think by if you account for like streaming metrics, it's approaching, I think sometime in the next year or two, it'll finally be qualified as like a gold single. But
really,
yeah, which is wild.
That is so rad. So they do gold singles for streams now. They should. Yeah,
they have a metric for how they can equate streams into like what the equivalent of like an album sale would be.
That's rad, because a lot of artists aren't benefiting from that, you know, anymore. As far as like, if you put a record out, I mean, selling it is probably way down compared to like somebody just streaming it on Spotify. Exactly,
man. So yeah, that song, man, it just really launched everything for me. And I was touring a ton that year and just had a lot of momentum. And then I went away and made my second record. And I guess, I don't know, I got a little burned out that those couple of years where I was like, writing all these songs on my acoustic guitar and acoustic piano. I was kind of tired of that sound, and I was listening to a lot more alternative music at the time, and getting into synthesizers and things like that. And I wanted to make music that was more like that. And that was my plan for my second record. And my manager was like kind of freaked out about that because we had so much success with the first album and the sound of that. He was afraid to, to move away.
Sure.
To rock the boat. And but I was just pretty adamant. I was like, this is the sound I love and this is what I want to go for, and it'll be fine. And so I found a new producer. His name is Chad Copelin. He works out of Norman, Oklahoma. I met him on the road touring with Ben Rector. I don't know if you're familiar with Ben.
The name sounds familiar, but
he's a Nashville guy. I'm sure he'll be on your radar eventually.
Cool.
I was opening for him. Chad was playing in his band and had produced some of his records. And so I hooked up with Chad. We made my second record, which is, like I said, a total departure sonically. But, you know, it hit, like it worked. And I think some people who were kind of into my older sound were a little confused, but a lot of people were happy to kind of come along for the ride. And then I picked up a lot of new listeners as well. Just kind of continued touring and continue making songs and staying independent the whole time. And somehow
that's amazing.
Accrued this audience, you know, that allows me to have a career.
On that second record, is that when you started playing keyboards? Because I did notice that you play piano.
Yeah, I wasn't playing. I mean, I was dabbling in that on my first record, but no, that's when I started writing primarily on a synthesizer or a keyboard. Starting with that second record. Yeah.
Did you go to college for music or no?
No, I didn't know what I wanted to do. So I went into business marketing, and
I guess that works. Similar, right?
Yeah. I was going to switch to music toward the end there when I decided I wanted to try being a singer-songwriter. But it was going to add like at least 2 more years to my program and me being there. And I don't know. I guess I just felt like I don't know. Yeah. I wasn't trying to be like a formally trained musician. I didn't want to teach or anything like that. So I just want to be a, songwriter. So I figured I could maybe teach myself that.
Sure. Okay. That makes sense. Cause I was wondering, you said right out of college, you moved back home and you were playing in bars and clubs and stuff. So I didn't know if that was something you were pursuing in college, or it was something that you're like, you know what, this is going to be, I enjoy this. Let's go for it.
Yeah, no, that's what it was. And everybody, my family was really surprised. My friends were kind of surprised because I was always, like I said, I wasn't really like the obvious musician growing up. I had friends who were way more talented than I, or superior musicians, but like I said, I just had an instinct for writing, I felt like, and melodies. And so I figured I could figure out the rest. So.
Sure. I mean, obviously you're very successful at what you're doing. So that must've been a pretty good validation though, getting the syncs and getting, even getting your song on KCRW. That's so huge for any artist.
Absolutely. And the irony too, I always laugh when I tell this story. So in college, I had just finished college, but my girlfriend she was a senior, and we'd hang and visit, and she loved Grey's Anatomy, and a bunch of her favorite artists she had discovered through that show. And that was always kind of, when we'd like daydream about me being a musician and what I was going to do in the future, that was kind of like, oh, wouldn't that be so cool, to have
like the pinnacle.
Yeah, that was the pinnacle. That was like, you'd made it, and then, we dated for a couple of years after college, and we're getting a little bit more serious, but then she broke up with me. It was devastating. And I wrote this record sort of out of that devastation. And then that ended up being the record that got all over Grey's Anatomy. So I thought that was a pretty amazing full circle irony.
That is so cool. Yeah. I did see too that you've released, even with that record that you said, you kind of went more of the alternative synth route. You did a stripped down version of those songs. You called that Hushed.
Yes, we did. And that was sort of in response to my manager being like, hey, can we at least do an acoustic version? And I thought,
okay, I was wondering.
And I was like, I don't want to do the obligatory acoustic version. So what if we just call it Hushed, and we strip away a lot of this production, but we still keep it pretty like synthetic and electronic. It's almost like they're almost like the slow jam R&B versions of the record. If you listen to it, it's not really acoustic, but that was my compromise. And that ended up being received really well as well. So
yeah, was that a pretty fun project to do? Like take those songs and strip them back?
Oh yeah. I mean, it wasn't like we were remixing, where you just go into sessions and take away. Like we literally changed the keys and changed the tempos, and I had to re-sing everything. And it was so much fun that we did it again for my third record, and we'll probably do it again here for my fourth one.
Oh, you will? That was my next question.
Yeah.
Continue on with the idea.
I think so. I don't know if I'll do 5 songs. That's what we've done for the other. Maybe I'll do like 2 or 3. But yeah.
That is cool. I'm curious to know where you were at when COVID happened and how that kind of affected this next record.
Yeah, I was we're living here in Chicago, but when it all kind of broke out, I was actually in Los Angeles at a concert and like with a ton of people. And I actually think that's like, I think I got it when I came home. My daughter and I were like sicker than we've ever been, like coughing for weeks, and we didn't really understand what it was that we had, And then as we were getting healthier is when everything blew up and shut down, and we figured out what was going on. But
you were playing a concert, or you were just attending?
I had recording sessions that week in LA, and I have a friend who performs as SYML. I don't know if you're familiar with SYML.
Oh yeah, I know SYML.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Yeah, Brian is a good buddy of mine, and he was playing a show. He was opening for Dermot Kennedy at the Wiltern in Los Angeles.
Oh, wow.
And so we all went out, me and a bunch of friends, and we had the same licensing agent. So like, it was like a big crew of like 15, 20 people, and we're all like hanging, and then a bunch of us all got sick.
Oh man.
It's crazy. So yeah, but I was home, I'm home here in the Chicagoland area, and when everything shut down, and I didn't actually have any plans to be performing live or anything that year or last year. I was really just finishing the writing and demoing for what became Nightshade.
So you're already working on the record?
Yeah.
Okay.
I started writing and demoing in like 2018, right as I finished up my last record cycle, and began recording Nightshade. I guess I didn't know what it was going to be called or really what it was yet, but we started recording those earliest versions in 2019. And then I finished the writing in 2020, as well as the recording as well. Yeah.
Okay. And then
Yeah.
how early in 2020 was it difficult to finish up the record with, restrictions and all of that?
Well, yeah, it made it a little tricky at first. I probably finished the writing and I was like ready to make this record in March, I would say, of 2020. So pretty early on in the locking down quarantine phase. And we had tentative plans to go down to El Paso. There's a studio in El Paso, Texas, or actually just outside of El Paso, Texas, called Sonic Ranch. My producer has made tons of trips down there from Oklahoma to make records with artists, and had been trying to get me down there for years, really, because it's just such a special place to make music. And it's a little bit more costly to do it there than it would be to do it at his studio. So I'd sort of always put it off. But for this record, it felt like the right call. And so we were supposed to be down there in May, but then a couple people involved in the project didn't feel comfortable flying on an airplane quite that early. And so we pushed it to July and, checked in, and still people weren't feeling great about it. So then we pushed it to August. And that was the point at which I was feeling okay or comfortable traveling, but still a handful of kind of key people weren't. And so, rather than continuing to push it, we just decided to keep the plan and allow those people to contribute remotely if possible, and then bring in other people to kind of take their place if they weren't able to be there. So that part of it was tricky and kind of sucked having to make those decisions. But I knew I was like, I gotta, it's been, by the time I put this thing out, it's going to have been like 4 years since my last record. I got to get moving on this thing. So we did, and it all worked out fine. And those people who weren't able to be there ended up being able to contribute remotely, and it was great.
So you did record the record at Sonic Ranch? We
did. Yeah.
Wow. What was that like? I mean, they've recorded so many iconic bands, and I mean, at the drive-in, even Brand New recorded Science Fiction there, I think.
Oh man, I didn't realize that. That's bad.
So like,
I knew like Bon Iver had just been there the previous summer, and like Beach House has made some of my favorite albums there. It's funny. It's a funny place. It's like this giant working pecan farm. It's 3,000 acres of pecan trees that the studio is located on. And yeah, it's been a working pecan farm for, I don't even know how many years, maybe like 70 years or something. And it was passed down the family to this guy who owns it now named Tony. And he basically runs it. He's a music enthusiast, I guess. And so at some point, like 20 something years ago, he built a little studio, and then some of those local hardcore bands in Texas started recording there. And the bands like, Mars Volta and At the Drive-In and stuff kind of started putting it on the map. And I don't know, it just was perfect. I mean, COVID aside, it was just a perfect place to make a record because, we're all married and we have kids. It's not as easy to get away as it used to be when we were making albums. And so it was just nice to have a 2-week chunk where we could just kind of, the cell reception's not great there, which is ideal actually, because you're just, I don't know, it just produced an environment that made it really easy to create. And it's about 3 miles from the Mexican border, kind of where, and actually, I went for a jog and was able to actually see the wall, the famous wall that everyone's always talking about. And this was, Trump was still president at the time. And so the wall was this huge issue. I mean, it still is, but, and I got to see it in person. And it's crazy. It was huge. I mean, it was like Jurassic Park. It felt like they were trying to keep like a dinosaur out, it's just like, it was pretty wild.
It's intense. Yeah. I'm from San Diego, and we're fairly close to the border, and you drive down and see it. It's pretty epic.
Yeah, it's so incredible to see firsthand. And as soon as we got close to it, the Border Patrol guy came out and asked us what we're up to, and we got to chat with him for a while. Yeah, it was cool. We kind of were able to chat with him and get his perspective on things. He was like he was born in Mexico, but had immigrated to the U.S., and now he was a Border Patrol agent. So he had an interesting perspective being a Mexican born citizen. And I don't know. It was a cool afternoon that we got to go visit that. And a lot of the staff that work at the studio are Mexican. They come over across the border every day to work, and like there's this little crew of women who make the meals. And so every day, 3 meals a day, you'd go in there and they have a little menu on the wall, and you'd say like, chilaquiles today, please, and they'd whip it up for you. And it was so cool to like have like truly authentic, homemade Mexican food. Was so rad every day. Yeah, I don't know, man. It was just a really magical. Yeah, it was hot as hell, but it was just it was August.
I can imagine.
But
it was so rad.
Yeah, we loved it, man. It was great, and I really think it just allowed, for whatever reason, I can kind of hear its impact on the album.
On the album, were you? Was it difficult to kind of sit on the album for a while before putting it out?
Well, I mean, so we let's see, we laid the foundations in Texas in August of 2020. And then I made, how many trips? I think like 4 trips to Norman, Oklahoma to do overdubs and finish up some stuff and mixing and all that stuff, because we mixed it ourselves. So I didn't have, and then we mastered it on top of that. So by the time I had a master, it was actually March of 21, like 6 months ago.
Okay. So yeah. It wasn't like you were sitting with it for a year going, okay, let's keep tweaking this, or okay.
Exactly. Yeah, no, I didn't have a master till March. And then I had to figure out, a release plan. I didn't want to just put it out, 3 weeks later. Like I wanted to unroll it, or, I wanted to roll it out, so to speak, strategically and be smart about it. So I hired somebody to help me do that. We put a whole little team together and just put out a couple singles, and then the album about a month ago.
Yeah, very cool. And you've just finally got to do a couple of shows, right? You did about four shows earlier this month.
Yep.
Just got home on
Sunday. It was weird. The first night was weird. We played Chicago, my hometown. And that was the first show I'd played in over 2 years. And so, that felt a little funny, being on stage with a bunch of people in front. Like I just never thought, the last 2 years has been so wild that, you just almost thought like I'll never be in a small club with hundreds of people again,
Right. Yeah. Like looking out to this, was it like an emotional feeling?
Yeah, it was. I mean, performing for me is, kind of alluding back to what I said early on in the conversation, that like I was never the best musician or singer. Like the writing was the thing I always felt I was good at. And I've had to figure out how to do the live performance thing over the years. So for me, performing is always kind of an anxiety-filled situation.
Yeah,
and so
for sure.
Combining that with just the emotion of like being back and performing and having all these people just so stoked to be there and singing along and all that. So it was very, it was an emotional experience, and but it went well. It went really well. And then it was almost like once I got through the first couple songs, then I just felt like riding the bike a little bit, and
sure.
And then we played New York a couple of days after that, which was wild to be back in New York City. I loved it. We had a blast. And then I came home for a couple of days. I played Nashville, and then we flew to Los Angeles and played Los Angeles as well. And now I'm home. So it was.
With now that, I mean, I have 2 kids and a wife, and I would imagine with a family now, is it harder to, I mean, you did a few, is it easier to do those one-off shows than like a full, like, month, 2-month tour?
Yeah, definitely. The last really long tour I did was more than 3 years ago, where I'm gone for months. And I almost, when I got home from that, I almost kind of said, I think this will be the last one, like anything I do in the future will be, I think 10 days is a good
shorter runs.
Yeah, exactly. Like you can knock out 7 shows in 10 days, maybe. And I did that a couple times in 2019. And then this tour I did, last week was like the easiest tour you could imagine, because it was, 2 shows per week with a day off in between for flying. And just to keep things really simple, because of everything going on, we decided just to do them like stripped down acoustic shows. So there was hardly any production to worry about.
Oh, wow.
Just really, it was actually the easiest tour I've ever had to do. And it seemed like the fans were just stoked to hear the songs presented in like a different way than they've heard them before. And I don't know. Yeah, there's something there. I might kind of pursue that more going forward, even though I do love playing the songs, with the big full production, the way they are recorded. But man, is that a lot of work to like, you know,
I would imagine, having the band and then getting everybody there. And
oh my gosh,
yeah.
the band. And like the last time I really did this, like, you know, you got the band and you're going to put all this money into the way it sounds. And so you want a front of house engineer who knows how it's supposed to sound. And so there's another guy, and then, you know, lights, you want it to look cool. Yeah. You got lights and production. Yeah. It's a big undertaking. And, I've always been an independent artist. I'm mostly self-managed as well. And so it's a lot for me to do all by myself. So this past couple weeks of touring, it was really refreshing.
That's good, man. Well, and dude, congratulations on all the success, especially without, you know, the label and everything else you had going on. I mean,
thank you. That was not really by, like, I tell people all the time, my first manager, he really was the one who was pretty adamant about at least starting off independent and then seeing how things go. And I think early on with some of the success, there were labels reaching out, but nothing that really, or at least what he told me, it was nothing that really made sense, or that was more appealing than what we were doing on our own at that point. So we just stayed independent for those first couple of records, and then he and I parted ways after 2 albums, because he had started another company. And it just made sense that he focus purely on that. And so then I became self-managed really for the last like 5 years. I've had a couple different instances where I've tried bringing in a manager to help out, and it hasn't worked out. But I think if it hadn't been for my first manager, Seth, and if I had just had all this success on my own and a label came calling, I probably would have been like, sure, where do I sign? You know, I just didn't know any better.
I mean, that's all people really knew, right? I mean, especially nowadays with streaming numbers and, you know, the ability to kind of have a song go viral without a label. You don't really quite need their support. No. I mean, it would be nice, I would imagine, for covering costs, but like in the grand scheme of things, if it's just you and a guitar, like why would you? Exactly.
I know. And so I feel really thankful, because I talk to people all the time who are just like, man, I can't believe like you're independent, you own everything. It's, you know, it's just, it's yeah, exactly. And like I've said, it's allowed me to have a career and you know, a house and a family and all this stuff. So yeah, it's been great.
That is amazing. Well, Andrew, man, thank you so much for taking the time to talk with me today. I appreciate it.
Absolutely, man. I appreciate the interest.
Yeah. I have one more question for you. I want to know if you have advice for aspiring artists.
And yeah, well, I guess people ask me that sometimes at shows, and the thing I always tell them is that, you know, I'm 37 now, and I've been doing this for a long time. And so I'm a little bit more picky, or like, I'm just not, I don't have the energy for everything anymore the way I used to. But like when I was in my early 20s and I was just excited and hungry, and I just said yes to everything, every open mic, every supporting slot, every just random opportunity that came about. I just said, yeah, sure, I'll be there, you know. And looking back and having conversations with people like you and talking about my career and reflecting on it, I'm like, that's 100% why I have a career now, is because I just opened myself up to opportunities, and I wasn't too scared or prideful to say yes to things. So that's why I always tell people, is just take every opportunity you can. You're going to learn something from it, or you're going to meet somebody who's going to point you to the next thing, and, you know, you'll be glad you did. So